Hey guys, welcome back. It is your favorite Gimp of the Limp, and as you can see, I'm back with some more 1985 Under an Iron Sky. Now, this is kind of turning into a boot camp series, but I'm definitely not going down that route because there's just way too much for me to cover to go all in depth with that. But there are a few more things that I want to cover about the game so you guys understand a few more aspects of it. I want to kind of address helicopters. We haven't touched on them very much just yet. I want to go over kind of the end phase of the game and then reinforcements, resupply, how that comes in, and then some final thoughts. So that's going to be either one video, depending on how long it takes me to cover all that stuff, or two videos. So we'll just see how it goes. We're going to use our same example that we were eyeballing earlier. These two guys have a little attack going on over here. Make sure you watch previous videos, all that good happy crap. Now, one of the things that you could do is bring in air units for ground strike, right? We talked about that using jets. Well, you can also use your helicopters, and remember, they don't count towards the airstrike. So you could send in helicopters and jets if you wanted to. And if we look over here, we have some Soviet helicopters that are nearby that they could get involved in this little combat that's going on. So there's a stack of three. We're going to just use one as an example. And let's say he wanted to fly and come in here as a ground support mission to do this. Now, they can do a lot more besides just this. They can do ferry missions, well, depending on the helicopters, like transport helicopters and stuff. But they can do more than just ground support. They have a plethora of air support missions they can do, just like aircraft have. But as our example, the ground strike, let's say he's coming in here. Well, we notice that their first number there, if I can hold the counter correctly, is very large. All right, that is not his airstrike number. That is his movement points. Because unlike jets, you actually keep track of movement points, and you're going to map out exactly how the helicopter is going to fly to its target and then back from its target. That's especially going to matter for all the air to ground, or ground to air rather, equipment that the enemy has, and the air support areas, that the air superiority areas that you're flying through. Because for each area that you fly through that has enemy air superiority, you have to roll for possible interception. And the thing is, helicopters don't take damage like aircraft do, so they wouldn't get a damage step potentially. They just lose steps flat out. So that's why you have the damage step loss there on the back of the counter. So anytime you would potentially have a damage result for a helicopter, it's just going to flat out be destroyed, a step loss. It's done. So you're going to have to keep track of what hexes they're flying through, but helicopters don't have the exact same flak rules that jets do. Generally speaking, the ground to air surface assets, they're not going to have as far range or as good of capabilities. They're going to get reduced if they have an A or a B rating down to at least a C rating. Now, if they're already D, they don't get bumped up. So in other words, the ground to air stuff is nowhere near as effective against helicopters. But helicopters also do have the ability to do nape of the earth flying, and that changes it. So it's one movement point per hex that they're going through when they're just moving, when they're just flying. But if you decide to do nape of the earth, that counts as 3 movement points for each hex that you're going with. So they're effectively real close down to the ground, scooting across it, so they're a harder target to hit. By doing so, that reduces the range of any ground support stuff, right? They're flak to 0 hexes. They can only hit you if you actually go into that hex if you're flying nape of the earth. So that's really good for them, but that will burn through their fuel effectively very quickly. You lose a lot of movement points. So you only want to do that when you're in range of enemy stuff. There is a whole section in the rule book. Let me pull up here, show you guys. You see here, flak versus helicopters, and there's a lot that goes into it. You see that it only has all flak has a range of 1 hex against helicopter squadrons just in normal flight. But that nape of the earth reduces it down to 0. And they do explain in that little addendum down below it where that, yeah, helicopters that are nape of the earth probably wouldn't be hit because these hexes are supposed to be signifying 14 kilometers wide, and at nape of the earth, they couldn't be hit from 14 kilometers away, but they have to get a lot closer to their target. So this rule basically exists just so they can still be shot at by ground-to-air stuff. Now, before I continue going on with that, remember, we still have to contend with that interception. So as you're traveling, right, as you're going along and you're determining whether or not you're at normal or nape of the earth flying along, you have to deal with these air superiority zones. And it comes into play for each one that you enter and re-enter, okay? So as we see here, this one, NATO has superiority, and in the target hex, NATO has superiority. So we would do an interception, and I'm going to show you guys in the player aid where the interception roll is. You would do an interception for here, where NATO has a chance to attack them with their air superiority fighters. And then you would do another one here when he entered this mega hex to conduct his ground support mission. If he survives both of these interceptions, then they would go on to attack the target. We'll show the ground strike rating here in just a sec. But let's say all that's successful. He's good. He's got movement points left, and he can make his way back. As he flies back, he re-enters this megahex because his helipad is here in the megahex. Now, he could fly to a different one that is in the play area. He doesn't necessarily have to return back to the one that he started from. But if he wants to return back to that one, he has to re-enter this megahex, which means there's another interception attempt. So this helicopter, if we just play it normal, flying from here over to here to do its ground support mission, and then coming back, has to be potentially intercepted 3 times. Okay, so looking here in our flak table, right next to it you see is the helicopter interception table. Now that's the one that we're going to be looking at, and you see at the top of it, it has the number of air superiority squadrons. So that's how many squadrons are actually in one of these boxes. So in these boxes, we only have 1 in each. So they would only be rolling on that first column there for just 1 squadron. But you are going to use their evasion rating. Now for our helicopter, let's grab him up here so you guys can see. We see that his evasion rating is also that middle number there, and that's a 6. All right, so his ground strike rating is going to be a 7. That would be how much he would add, just like the aircraft, to the ground support mission. But 6 would be his rating, and we would look here, and at 6, he gets a +3 modifier. So with only 1 squadron there, there's not a huge chance that they're going to lose a step there. I think they would have to roll a 4 or under on a D20, which isn't bad, but you got to think, you got to do that 3 times. That's significant. Okay, so again, looking at it, let's say our helicopter had come in and he survived the interception here, he survived the interception here. Then when he enters this hex, because he would have to enter to actually do his ground support part of it, that's when you're going to, again, look at this flak fire table. And we saw that one, it's got a D rating, but it only does steps damaged. So right there on the D, you see it only goes up to steps damaged. However, if that one were to actually hit the helicopter, remember, helicopters don't have damaged steps. They just are going to have destroyed steps. So they would just be destroyed. Now, aircraft, the jets, when they perform missions like this, before that flex step, they have that potential to abort. They can voluntarily abort their mission and not take flak fire. Helicopters do not have that luxury. So they enter the hex, they have to take that flak fire. And if they were to re-enter a hex for some reason, whatever the case may be, let's say he had to fly through here and was dumb enough to fly back through there, they would be able to fire again, just like how the air superiority works. But in this case, let's say he survives the flak and all the other good stuff, he would get to add his 7 strike value to this attack that's being conducted. So we would have our 5 from the artillery, 5 from this, and then the 7 from the helicopter being added, which would give them a total of 27 against 4. That's, fairly significant. But then once that's done, he would fly back and potentially be intercepted for possibly more destroyed steps. That's going to come into play fairly significantly, especially for transport missions, because there are the special forces units that can be transported by helicopter and dropped off. Well, you lose those units if the helicopters carrying them get destroyed. So you really have to plot out which direction you're going to go. And now you see again why these air superiority control zones are so important, because by having just control of these, you're gaining all this advantage, because now, in our case, NATO has control of both of these. All of the air missions that are coming through here have to incur penalties, possible interceptions. These can be used in air intercepts. There are just so many good things that can happen from having these air superiority zones. So you really want to have control of these. All right, a couple other things I want to reiterate about helicopters. Now, this first part I had mentioned previously. All right, but I'm going to go over it again. Remember, we talked about their movement value. We see here 35. And they have to be able to use within that 35. So it's not like 35 out and then 35 back. It's 35 total, all right, for this helicopter specifically. See, this one's 33, 35 over here. It just depends on the helicopter. They need to be able to get there and back. You can technically do missions that are beyond their range. So what is half of that? So it's like 17. So he can only go 17 hexes out max, right? And get back, or 18, depending on the math. Let's say 18. Yeah, 18. Well, let's say the target he wants is 19. He can't get back to a friendly airfield. Well, that means he's going to crash. Yes, technically you can sacrifice your helicopters in that way to attempt to do whatever mission it is. But like I mentioned in a previous video, they do mention that that's a gamey tactic and it's not really encouraged. So I would kind of make that as a judgment call for your own games. If it's a make or break type mission, something that's really going to affect the gameplay, like would they be willing to sacrifice these troops or the helicopters to try to get these special forces in for this last ditch mission? Yeah, that'd be really cool. That'd be a neat mission to run, knowing that you're going to lose those guys or lose those helicopters or whatever the case may be doing that mission, but it's a last ditch to try to save it. Yeah, that's cool. But if they're doing it just to game the system and not really real world type scenarios, then yeah, I would avoid that. Now, something else neat about helicopters is they get to perform an action during both like action phases. So during the Warsaw Pact phase, they can move and do stuff. And then during the other side, during NATO's turn, they can do stuff, right? So they have a little bit more leeway than jets do. Way I would personally kind of handle that is maybe turn them to the side or upside down once you've used them in one phase, just to signify that they have been used, and then maybe put a bead on them or turn them back a different direction. Just whatever works for you, but just try to remember however works for you if you've moved them or not during that phase. Just like you're going to do with other units, keeping track of that stuff. You need to do that with your helicopters. For me, I was kind of thinking, turn them upside down, signify the fact that they've moved during this phase. And then if they move in the next phase, you're turning them back right side up to signify that they're, moving both phases. And then they're ready to go on the next turn. Okay. I already know I'm not going to have enough time to do this all in one video, so we'll break it up into two. So there'll be one more after this where I cover a little bit about reinforcements, because there's a fair amount that goes on with reinforcements, replacements, that type stuff. I quickly want to eyeball the end phase, just go over that real quick. And then, like I said, next video we'll do reinforcements and some final thoughts about the game. All right, so end phase. All air squadrons in air superiority are returned to a valid airfield. So, and these markers are going to be returned. So this marker, and then this marker here are all going to be coming back. And when you hit your air superiority phase, you're going to redo that. So they don't stick in between turns. You're going to pull those off, redo the whole thing. Wild weasel markers are removed. That's a special rule that we haven't covered, kind of like the seed missions. All air squadrons in the U section of an undamaged airfield, undamaged, key thing there, are moved to the ready section. So guys like this would get just pop back over, so you know that they're available to be used in the next turn. All right, so continuing on, and then all the repair operations of damaged air squadrons occur. Now, if you guys remember from our previous videos, we had one that got damaged here, right? So aircraft do have the ability to become damaged. Now, the way that this is going to work here, as long as the airfield is in supply and not damaged, because remember, in this game, you can damage the facilities on the board. Airports can be attacked, infrastructure can be destroyed, all right? So as long as the airfield is still in good standing, then for Warsaw Pact, they each have basically one repair point that they can spend. And then for NATO, they have 3. So this one, with only a single damaged aircraft, they would be able to pull that one back around and just pull this damage counter off. Now, if they had more than one in that airport, that airfield there, they would only be able to repair just one. So they would have to pick which one of them would be repaired and moved over. Fairly easy to remember though. NATO gets 3. Warsaw Pact gets 1 for their airfields. Now, this is separate from the repair points that we had talked about previously. I'm going to point those out here in just a sec. I actually think that that's the next thing on our little list here. Nope. Repair operation air squadrons. All right, so all eligible flak and artillery units receive their full complement of ammunition points. So guys like this over here who spend flak ammo, as long as they are in supply, right? They're in communication, they're in supply, the general rules that you're used to when it comes to these war games, as long as they're still good, they're going to get their supply back. Now, like I said, supply is something that you can handle kind of as a choice. There are optional rules to where you can make it more in-depth, or just the basic rules, which go more in line with general war games of stuff you're used to. All right, and then continuing on, all NATO ground units receive their full complement of embedded supply. That's like the embedded is the center. So like our attack that was going on here, if they use supply points for ammunition points, something like that, same type rules are going to apply, that they are going to get restocked. And then repair of ground of operations and installations occur. So let me grab the scenario book. All right, so one of the things I pointed out to you guys before is the assets that are listed down. And if we look here, like our air superiority markers, that was one of the assets. The nuclear stuff we haven't touched on too much, but repair points. NATO in this scenario gets 6, and Warsaw Pact gets 5 per turn. When it comes to repairing installations on the board, those are the points that you're going to use to spend to do stuff like that. So if your airfields get knocked out, a strike comes in and takes out its functionality, or bridges get destroyed, whatever happens, you're going to use those points, those repair points, to take care of that stuff. Now, I'm not sure if it's listed down somewhere else, but it is listed down here in your rule book under the repair section. So as long as the installation meets certain conditions, which you have to have the points, and it has to, where's it at? Be occupied or in a friendly zone of control, and must be able to trace a line of communication. Then it can potentially be repaired. If it's in a nuclear contamination zone, it can be repaired by expending double the usual number of repair points. But then it lists down underneath it how many repair points it takes to repair stuff. So if an airfield got damaged, it's 5. Heliport, it's 3. A port is 10. And a bridge is another 3. So that's what you're going to be using those points for. So the repair points do not go towards your aircraft up here. They're going to go towards these installations, those valid airfields, the ones that are still functioning in communication and supply. They're going to have just a set number of repairs that they can do each turn. Okay, so we're going to pause here for now. Like I said, I didn't think I'd have enough time to cover every little tidbit that I want to cover. We're going to pick up the next video and I'm going to address these guys, because if you remember early on, I said these are the reinforcements that are scheduled to come into the game later on. So they're handled a little bit differently than usual. I want to kind of touch on that because there's a lot of little finite or small rules that kind of affect these guys on where they're going to go. In this scenario, those reinforcements are actually your victory points. So for NATO, they, by rejecting the reinforcements, not accepting them, sending them to another theater of the war that's off map, that's how they get victory points. But it's also going to make you weaker on the board because you don't have those assets to, defend yourself against this overwhelming red wave that's coming in. So it's, how well can you hold out without those guys coming in? And then Warsaw Pact in this scenario is getting points for destroying your stuff. So they're trying to destroy your stuff and you're trying to say, no, I don't want more stuff for your victory points. Real neat scenario. I like that. But anyway, yeah, we'll cover on that more when I get into final thoughts about the game, touch on how that's going to work. All right, but if you guys have any questions, like always, feel free to put it down below and I will answer them to the best of my ability. Stay tuned for the next video. I should have it up soon and we'll cover the final aspects of the game. All right, you guys take care. I'll see you in the next one.